While MPs were the talk of the town this week, former President Jacob Zuma had to appear in court. Zuma's legal woes began 14 years ago. It's been a back-and-forth chess game, but now Zuma is making his final move for a permanent stay of prosecution. Michael Apple takes a look.
Everything that has happened over the last 14 years or so traces back to the 1990s multi-billion rand arms deal. Jacob Zuma is accused of receiving bribes from French arms company Thales. The payments are allegedly facilitated through his financial advisor Shabir Sheikh, who is found guilty of fraud and corruption in June 2005. Thus begins a legal ping-pong game that feels like it's been on in the background as long as the bold and the beautiful. On the 29th of June 2005, Zuma appears in the Durban Magistrates Court on graft charges. Just over a year later, in September 2006, the case is struck off the roll as the state was not ready to proceed. In late December 2007, just after he beats Mbeki in the ANC presidential race in Polokwane, Zuma is charged with racketeering, money laundering, corruption and fraud.
I fought so hard not to become the president of the ANC, to clear my name. That's a fight I fought. Fought very hard because I was said I was a corrupt person, and I was not. I was never.
In early April 2009, then NPA head Mokotedi Mshe drops the charges against Zuma, citing political interference and manipulation.
I have come to the difficult conclusion that it is neither possible nor desirable for the NPA to continue with the prosecution of Mr. Zuma.
Thus begins a series of court applications by the DA between 2009 and 2016 to have the decision to drop the charges set aside. In April 2016, the North Gauteng High Court finally finds that the NPA head's decision to drop the charges against Zuma was irrational.
The decision of the first respondent dated 1st April 2009 to discontinue the prosecution of the case against the third respondent in accordance with the indictment served on him on the 28th December 2007 is reviewed and set aside.
In April 2016, Zuma and the NPA appeal the ruling.
Those charges must be continued and Jacob Zuma must have what he's always wanted, his day in court.
Almost a year and a half later, in October 2017, it's yet another blow for Zuma and the NPA as the Supreme Court of Appeal dismisses the application. Then, fast forward 5 months to March 2018 for this announcement.
After consideration of the matter, I am of the view that there are reasonable prospects of a successful prosecution of Mr. Zuma on the charges listed.
Almost a month later, on the 6th of April, Zuma makes his first appearance in the Durban Magistrates Court on the re-enrolled corruption charges. Just over a year later, in May 2019, Zuma's bid for a permanent stay of prosecution begins in the KwaZulu-Natal High Court in Pietermaritzburg. It's confusing, it's complex, and it's a legal saga that's outlived many. How on earth has this been strung out for 14 years? The former Gauteng Premier Mbazi Mashalowa on Monday pointing out what Zuma's defense strategy has been all along, the Stalingrad strategy, where his defense team has played legal ping-pong for over a decade. Michael Apple, Johannesburg.
Transnet is now on the hunt for new executive management. Applications for posts such as CEO and CFO are still open. The state capture inquiry continued to focus on Transnet and its wasteful expenditure this week. Erin Bates reports.
Browsing through the careers section of the Sunday Times, it's clear Transnet is scouting for new executives. And applications for the most important posts in the company close next Wednesday. Transnet needs a new CEO, CFO, Treasurer and Chiefs of Information Systems and Procurement.
Whoever is to run it as the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer should be someone with good business experience, ability to manage and take business into higher heights. Procurement is such a key thing. It needs extensive skills, and given the tendency and the propensity in our country for people to abuse it, it needs to be elevated, and someone with the right qualifications must be put in place.
Currently, Transnet has an acting CEO. The board chair has explained why the former CEO is out.
And the board had decided that it would not extend his contract. Accordingly, he is no longer the acting group CEO, that unless he embraced the perspective of the board of full disclosure and of telling the truth, the perspective that there is nothing to defend, we would not have been able to present him to the Commission as a representative of Transnet.
The acting CEO's testimony at the state capture inquiry on apparent law-breaking left the chair stunned.
Unless there is somebody who comes up and gives a sound explanation why these procedures and processes were disregarded, it appears that it was just a blatant disregard of processes.
A number of these processes that we reference are standard processes in Transnet. None of them are complex, none of them are difficult to follow. We've been doing this in a particular way for a long period of time.
Former Transnet strategist Francis Callard has detailed glaring irregularities.
I prepared a case for these 100 locomotives that it was unilaterally changed by Transnet group executives.
Proceedings resume at 9 on Thursday.
We adjourn them.
Erin Bates, Johannesburg.
4 people, including former PIC CEO Dan Matjila, have been reported to the Hawks. The PIC inquiry has heard how one of them, Khulufelo Maponya, received a number of loans from the asset fund manager. And he insisted on a 96 million rand origination fee, something that's unprecedented. ENCA's Heidi Jokos brings us more.
Khulufelo Maponya has a 25% stake in SA Home Loans through PIC funding. What's dodgy is that he asked for a transaction origination fee first for 45 million rand and later 96 million rand. He claims he deserves the money because he brought the deal to the PIC. Standard Bank, which has a 50% stake in SA Home Loans, found this to be irregular. And yet Maponya and 2 PIC staff allege former PIC CEO Dan Matjila authorized the payments.
They informed us that in September 2018, and at a time when SA Home Loans was awaiting a response to the 10 billion rand loan application, Mr. Masekeza and Mr. Maponya, acting together, informed a senior executive of SA Home Loans that they had been authorized by Dr. Matjila to inform SA Home Loans that approval of the application for the additional 10 billion was conditional upon SA Home Loans agreeing to pay out of the proceeds 95 million rand to MMI as an origination fee.
He's testified how Matjila pushed for Khulufelo's company to get the stake in the mortgage provider, even though Standard Bank opposed it.
Standard Bank was reluctant to give its consent to the consortium acquiring these shares because the very purpose of the sale was to introduce an institutional buyer with sufficient capital and liquidity to provide support to SA Home Loans in times of need, and Mr. Maponya and his consortium at face value would not satisfy that requirement.
And Alexander Forbes Valuator has also told the inquiry the current state of the government's employee pension fund is poor given the bad investments made by the PIC. It appears the fund is no longer the cash cow it once was. Heidi Jokos in Pretoria.
More awards for 2 filmmakers who exposed the illicit trade in rhino horn. Stay with Weekend One.